What's going on, everybody? Jameson from Bad Publicity here. We are looking at episode 16 of season 4. We had a great response to our new player guide to the NEH last week. We had a lot of people sit down and request, or not sit down, but like write in and request us to do a runner side. And one of the main runners that people are going to face in tournaments and stuff like that, if you want to be able to jump in to this game right now and be able to pilot some of the forefronting decks, look at last week's NEH. This week we're going to do a typical Kate Shaper build, and you should be good to go. As long as you have the cards, these two guides will give you the understanding you need to at least get your foot in the pool, and then it's just up to you to dive in and practice with the getting the repetitions of the deck in. Hollis, what's going on with you, man? You're on board with that. These are two of your bread and butters, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that when we were looking at deck archetypes to focus on and talk about, it seemed like one of the things we wanted to do was try to help some of the players in the game kind of bridge that gap. I mean, a lot of players know that NEH fast advanced decks are good. A lot of people know that Kate prepaid voice pad decks are very good. This is going to be kind of a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about the card choices, how to play the deck. If you want to get an idea of why these tier 1 decks are very good, in addition to just to seeing it online and seeing it win, it may help some of you to also get an explanation of particular card choices and why they're so important. And you can take a lot of that knowledge and move that over to other competitive decks that you want to make, whether they're custom decks or decks you've seen before. You'll start seeing some of the more common threads. So it's a great thing. If you're a newer player and you want to enjoy talking about a competitive deck, perfect. If you're an intermediate player and you want to see if you can get even more insight from these tier 1 decks that you're probably already tooling around with, awesome. And if you're a competitive player, why not join in on the discussion? If we miss anything, fill in the gaps. Give additional feedback. We want to make sure that players of the game are trying to get something out of this with some of these tier 1 decks and understanding how they really run.
Yeah, that's true, because good competition is good for the game, right? Like, nobody likes to walk up to a table on game night and just steamroll 3 people in a row. This Netrunner community's always been about helping the game grow. Without people coming into the game, that you've pretty much stagnated the growth, right?
Right.
So, like you said, these builds are very common to the faction as well as these specific archetypes that we're creating. So you'll see a lot of these common cards. Like in this episode, Shaper has very strong tools for recursion and R&D attack, and so you'll be able to if you take a section of that pie and then add some of your own flavor into it once you're ready, it's a great way to start branching out. Take this deck and slot in 2 or 3 different cards and make it your own, give it some plays and have some fun with it, and then that's a great way to learn the game in itself.
Yeah, totally agreed.
So let's unveil the I'll pull this Kate art drop down, and we'll look at the deck here. So do you want to just give us some history on this deck? So this is typically called a PvP Kate, right? Prepaid voice plan Kate. So when you guys see that's what this archetype is doing. So Hollis, can you just explain the synergy that's going on here and what we got going on, a high level overview?
Yeah, of course, always, try to give credit where credit is due. I unfortunately am not completely aware of the originator of the deck, but I believe it's Kalimsha, who initially came up with this particular style of deck. If I'm totally wrong, feel free to correct me later. I want to make sure the person who actually created this archetype does get their fair credit. But the overall strategy of the deck is there's a card, there's a piece of hardware that's neutral. And the card is called Prepaid Voice Pad. And what Prepaid Voice Pad says is that it gives you one reoccurring credit, and you can use that reoccurring credit to play events. And the strategy sort of works with the bulk of the Shaper events that Shaper has that are inherent in faction. Things like the Maker's Eye, things like Escher, other great events like Legwork, Levy AR Lab Access, and even Quality Time, and Dirty Laundry as a neutral card. The biggest card, though, that kind of keeps the deck running is a economy event card called Lucky Find, which costs 3 credits, but says, as an additional cost to play Lucky Find, spend a click, and it gains you 9 credits. So, as you can see here, having a card like Prepaid Voice Pad, which is giving you a discount on events you play, it means that a card like Lucky Find, where normally you would gain 6 for 2 clicks, you could gain more. You can gain 8, you can gain 9 credits for just 2 clicks, which, if you look at it in the concept of like a Magnum Opus or Melange Mining Corp on the Corp side, that's a great economy. And that's really that's really the focus of the deck, is using events at a very, very low cost, and basically providing yourself with a large economic advantage that lets you make the runs you need to make.
Perfect. So let's dive right in here. Those people listening right now in the chat, feel free to jump in at any time. Log your questions in there, and we'll hit them up as we go. Those people that are listening to this at a post time, sorry you don't have that luxury, but yes, if you have questions and stuff, slide them into the comments on this video or in our SoundCloud, or hit us up on Twitter, and we'll make sure that we get back to you guys. We're all over the place in social media, so you just got to find us, but the best place is actually in the comment located in this video, down under, just so it keeps everything in place, and other people can see, because most people have the same questions.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they do.
let's definitely dive in here. First off, as a runner, it's kind of uncommon to see you go above the minimum value. So this is a 45 card deck, and we're using the full 15/15 influence.
Right.
21 events here. So we're looking at Diesel, 3 copies of.
Yep.
Now Diesel is pretty standard, great draw, just a quick burst because it costs nothing. So
yes,
you're getting that instant return on it, boom boom. We're using Dirty Laundry, which has become another staple in most runner decks. It actually keeps the pressure and aggressiveness on the corp, because you're doing multiple things. Make the run, get the 5 credits, right, when successful. What's interesting now is, and if you watched our last episode a bit back on 5 influence cards, Escher has come back in. So there's 1 of Escher. We have 1 Legwork to apply pressure and multi-access on HQ. We have Levy to flip it all back together. 3 Lucky Finds, 1 Quality Time to get, sometimes you really need to find something and dig a little deeper than what Diesel's giving you. 1 Scavenge, 1 Stim Hack is always nice to have in your back pocket. Sure Gambles are standard, and 3 Maker's Eye. So, Hollis, you want to talk about how these events click together?
Sure. Yeah, man. So it's pretty obvious. I'll sort of kind of go down the list, I suppose, but the majority of the economy cards. So really, we're talking about Dirty Laundry, Sure Gamble, and Lucky Find. They all get better with a card like Prepaid Voice Pad. Again, remember, that's the card that provides you with a reoccurring credit to use events. So a card like Dirty Laundry, for example, where normally you're only really gaining 3 credits when it's all said and done, may actually net you, because you get to use the Prepaid Voice Pad credits to play it. It's netting you a full 5 credits after the run is successful. So, you can do something like make a single run on Archives or make a run on HQ to access just a single card access, because it's fairly inexpensive. And in the process, you're getting the access, you're getting a run, and you're getting, the money that you would gain back for even playing the card in the first place. And that's just a great advantage. When you get down to the other cards in the deck, you can tell that it's a lot about accesses and making sure you can get in and make each run effective. So on top of Dirty Laundry, you've got cards like Maker's Eyes. Maker's Eye lets you look at multiple cards from R&D. So R&D is a server there that is the main focus, as it should be, right? And allows you to access multiple cards. You've got a legwork there to try to grab the agendas that are in hand and take advantage of an HQ access instead of getting single accesses. You even have a card like Escher, where Escher normally costs you 3 credits to play, but its effect can be absolutely devastating during the game. Well, with prepaid voice pad in the deck, Escher could be discounted heavily, or it could be entirely free. Just depends on how many of the prepaids are available. Beyond that, you've got cards like Quality Time. Quality Time is going to allow you to draw 5, but again, the biggest advantage is with a card like Prepaid, the negative cost of a card like Quality Time, where you're spending 3, is being reduced. So the value of drawing those cards is getting even better. Jameson, hit the nail on the head with Diesel especially. It's just a great card to have early game. You can use it click 1, turn 1, and really you can be pretty confident you'll find cards to play out of hand right from the start. And then my favorite card in the entire deck actually is Stim Hack, because it is just amazing. I mean, the ability to gain 9 credits immediately and you make a run, it pretty much means that if you need to get into that server, barring some upgrade that's going to prevent you from getting in, you're going to make it.
Right.
And that's really the big thing. Really the biggest things in the deck. Oh, and then, Levy AR Lab access to kind of throw all those events right back in and redo it again. And even though 5 is pretty heavy, once again, when you've got prepaids rolling out, free money, reshuffling your hand and your discard pile and your deck together and having it all reset, at a discount, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, paying 2 and 3 credits to completely refresh your deck. Maker's Eyes are back. Your Lucky Find is back. Escher is back. Quality Time, Dirty Laundry, Sure Gamble, Lucky Find. Having all those things back means your economy is just, it lasts forever. I mean, it effectively, not forever, but it lasts until the game is over. And that's what I really, really like about the event spread in this deck.
So let's we will get into piloting and stuff in a little bit. So let's keep working on for card choices and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You will see that so we're playing 21 events, and as we get into hardware, you'll see why. So let's look through the 9 hardware that we have here. Astrolabe has become a pretty much staple console in most of the Shaper builds, and you know what, occasionally I do see it elsewhere, but I mean, Shaper has really taken to this console because it's cheap, gives you the free memory, and because of its draw power in the meta right now. Draw 1 card whenever the corp creates a server.
Yep.
This is going to help you build your hand up really quickly with the decks that you're facing now. RP has it's still going to always be there, but we're facing a lot of NEH decks now where people are always installing cards. So you're cashing in on those draws very easily.
Yeah.
Clone Chip is again a staple Shaper card because Shaper is built on recursion. Most people would kill to have something like this in their faction. So you really want to take advantage of Clone Chip in Shaper.
Yeah, for sure.
3 of them in there. We have one R&D interface, again, for typical Shaper pressure. And the card that makes the rest of the deck sing is the prepaid voice pad. 1 reoccurring credit, use this credit to play events. Now that's why we have 21 events in this deck, because the deck hinges off playing those events for free.
Yep.
Right? You are cashing in on, again, maybe you should step back and say also because of Kate's ability, prepaids come in for a lot cheaper as well.
That's correct.
right? We do have to remember that Mac lowers the install cost of the first program or piece of hardware you install each turn by 1.
Yep.
So this whole thing is about, maximizing your economy and only using it to either pay for your breakers when you need them.
Yep.
Anything you want to touch on the hardware there, very briefly, or?
You covered it really well. Actually, I really don't have anything else to add. I mean, it's the hardware I think is pretty standard for a deck like this, and prepaid is really the muscle in the deck. You are effectively investing because it is only going to cost you 1 credit to install because you're Kate. You're basically paying 1 credit to get a reoccurring 1 credit every turn, which when you take a second and you consider what's happening, that's just amazing. You're paying a single credit right now so that every turn you get an additional single credit. So Kate's ability is refreshing, and then this ability is refreshing. I mean, you can't do much better. I mean, that's a straight return on your investment immediately. So good.
Yeah. Let's move on to some resources here. We don't have very many. This deck holds 3 resources. 1 film critic, which has become, the way to deal with a lot of corporations out there with their tricky agendas. There's, okay, so for those people that are new to the game, film critic is a card that got a lot of buzz, and just trust us when we say that you should at least have 1 in your deck right now these days.
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen the forum posts on this card already. Same old thing. We're running 1 of these just because, 21 events, being able to recur 1 instantaneously after you've played it is such a good thing.
Yeah.
There is nothing in this heap of selection of events that is a discard waste of a card. Most of them are high attack cards that you can use, and the thing that this card synergizes with so well is the levy. It's going to let you, if you get your levy early, it's going to be able to let you ditch your levy.
Yeah.
And then have a same old thing on the table ready to use that levy when you so need to.
Yep.
Symmetrical Visage has become a new draw and credit engine in most decks out there. This replaced Professional Contacts. So
it did.
I mean,
it did, actually.
It's been a nice move because Professional Contacts, we've seen it before. The videos are out there. How much of a crippling play it is turn 1 of a game.
Oh man,
it just sets you behind.
It's so weird. It's one of those cards where I feel like I hate playing it, but I know when I have it, it is so hard to lose. It's what I mean. Like, it's so good. It's just so good. It's a love-hate relationship I have with that card right now.
The breakers here have become again staples across the Shaper builds. We're keeping 1 Atman in here. 2 ladies. 2 ladies is safe, because you're burning counters off it, so you want the extra lady in there. Gordian Blades, your Codegate Breaker. You have a Mimic and Sharpshooter just for the Destroyer subroutine ice. Programs, we are using Clot, 1 Data Sucker, 1 Parasite, and obviously 3 self-modifying code. They're in faction. Why not? It's too good of a card to pass up and help you get set up.
Yeah.
So, Hollis, those are the card choices in a standard Kate build right now.
Right.
Give or take 1. We'll talk about possible substitutions.
Sure.
Later in the show here, but a setup like this, what are you really looking for in a mulligan?
Yeah. So I guess ideally, the kind of hand I would like to have, and granted, it'll vary between a card or 2 based on matchup, I think. But the ideal hand for me would be something like Same Old Thing, Sure Gamble, same old thing, sure gamble, diesel. I'm so sorry. I said same old thing, man. Self-modifying code, sure gamble, diesel, clone chip, and prepaid voice pad. I think if I see all of those, my hand is... Yeah, I think if I see all 5 of those, I feel like my hand is so solid. Not looking at that dream hand, I think, in my opinion, I think the key cards I would kind of pay attention to, and I would kind of want to try to grab definitely...
Yeah, look at it as you get your starting hand.
Yeah.
If you see what 2 cards are you keeping?
I am pretty sure if I see 1 prepaid and 1 self-modifying code, I am keeping. I think so. Both of them together pretty much means that I can, early game, I might be able to be aggressive with any run that I make on R&D or HQ. If I get an early Maker's Eye, I can, hit for 3 cards really quickly. And a prepaid basically sort of sets up the economy for the rest of the deck. So obviously I want to see that usually as early as possible. I will say, granted, I'm not going to complain when I'm getting economy, but it is annoying, and prepaid players will tell you, it's a bit annoying when you're getting all this economy early and you've not seen a prepaid. I've had games where I've seen 6 economy cards, no prepaid yet, and I'm losing it. I'm like, all right, well, this is fine, but I'm not getting the biggest possible advantage. It's so irritating.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think you really have to have a reason to ditch a hand for a mulligan if you're holding a prepaid voice pad.
Yeah.
Within those cards, because that's what's making, like, the deck is called Prepaid Kate, right? Like,
yeah.
So if you're throwing away a pad, you better have a reason to do that.
Right. I think you would have to have, to me personally, I mean, it's pretty rare. I actually made this statement during my game night. I found that just because I'm aware of of how I've been playing Kate for a while now, it's pretty rare that I mulligan. It's interesting. I could be, I guess, a bit more picky, but it's pretty uncommon that I mulligan that often. The times I do mulligan is when I may have what I consider maybe one of the worst starts in the game. That would be something like if my opening hand probably has Levy Lab AR Lab access and Levy AR Lab access, and it has like a same old thing, and I have both those cards in my opening hand right at the beginning of the game. I'm usually going to be on the side of, and I don't see like either self-modifying code, symmetrical visage, or any economy at all. That hand's usually getting mulliganed, primarily because
good point in the chat here is that Kate really does need to know the cards in their deck.
Yes.
Right? And in their heap. You really have to know what you've discarded and what you have coming up. So this is not a deck, like we said at the beginning, you really have to practice with it because you have to know what to pull out in what scenarios. That's what Shaper does. They have these search tools and recursion tools for a reason. So you have to know when you have a self-modifying code on the table and you make that run, you're going to have to know what you want to pull out when you see the ice that you're facing, and judging by scenarios and stuff like that, you're going to have to know how different things interact with each other, right? Like if you have a clone chip on the table, a parasite in your heap, you have to be able to know when to pop that clone chip to bring back the parasite to kill that ice right away, because maybe you have data sucker tokens as well. You have to know those synergies that you can get away with.
That is true. I mean, that is a really big part of playing a Kate deck, is knowing how everything basically works together. Because another nickname for her is, or this kind of deck is called the Kate Toolbox. She really has an answer for pretty much everything.
But getting back to the mulligans and opening hand, I think that's a big hurdle for new players to realize is to what they need. Stuff that I would say that I'd like to see, if you don't get that prepaid voice pad in your opening hand, it's really nice. Like Hollis was talking about being able to get set up, right? You want to be able to see your prepaid. So, don't be too hard on yourself if you're holding some draw and you don't have the cards that you need, because that's why the draw is there, is to be able to dig through and get what you need. Now, it was also said before in the chat, quality time at the end of your turn, not knowing what to discard out.
Yeah.
Now, something like that, we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about how to pilot this deck together. But with the recursion that's built into this deck, you can't be afraid to react in the moment what you need by reading the board state. And that's only going to come with practice. You can usually get anything you pitch back.
Yeah.
What you primarily want to pitch off is, if you have a clone ship, don't be afraid to throw something like a breaker or a program into the heap, because you'll be able to get that back.
Right.
With levy, you always want to pitch the levy if you've seen it early, hoping that you can get the same old thing. But I think, to me, Hollis, if you don't get that voice pad opening hand, I'm more like to see at least a little bit of economy.
True. True.
And the cards that I like to get set up with, I would like to see an Astrolabe early, depending on my matchup.
Right.
Right? Because, there's nothing worse than not seeing your Astro when you're across from NEH and they're like, and, in your head, you're just like, oh, that could have been a draw. That could have been a draw.
Oh, yeah, that hurts. That hurts so much. Yeah.
And obviously, you're, if you don't have that Astro in early game, the symmetrical Visage, because you're going to spend that first click to draw a card anyway, you might as well have that on the table to draw and gain money. Anytime you can do two things off one click, you want to see that on the table. We will have a link to this deck. Actually, I wonder if I can throw this in the chat for you guys here now. There you go. We will have a link to this in the description, so don't worry too much about that there. Hollis, anything else like that you want to see opening hand that sticks out on you when you play? Talk about working your way out of the less ideal hand, right? Like,
yeah.
So obviously you like this. So this is, you haven't seen your voice pad. So again, like, what are you dripping with here?
Well, if you don't actually see the voice pad, I think the main issue is that you can't stop playing the game, right? So if you don't see prepaid voice pad early, you have to remember that, your economy is hurting a little bit more, but even without it, you still can get some pretty bursty, quick economy. So play the game knowing that. If you can't find all your prepaids, you still have to maintain a level of aggression that's going to force the corp to make decisions they're not ready or don't want to make. So you have to play your economy. You've got to make sure your breakers come into play as you need them, and you got to make runs. And you can't just stop your aggression. You can't stop your and focus entirely on a board progression or board development because you can't find those cards. Yes, they are important, and they will come. But you've got to play the game you would normally play, and you can't hinder yourself because that card's not coming.
Right. So what the last thing I would like to say about opening hand-wise, this is a tip I like to use myself when someone's posted an amazing deck online and you just want to start getting into it and learning it.
Yeah.
The one thing I used to do when building decks is if I wanted to see something, early game, I put more copies of it in a deck. So I would run max 3, right? Like if there was a console you wanted to see back in the day, if you were playing Noise and you wanted that Grimoire, 3, right? NBN wants to see that Sansan, 3 copies. Criminal wanted that Desperado. That's why it was so crazy. You ran 3 copies of Desperado.
Yeah.
So I think a good rule of thumb, now this is not for every scenario, but you look at a deck list like Kate and you look at anything that has 3 beside it, that's not too bad for an opening hand.
Right. Totally agreed.
Okay, right.
I can agree with this.
So, like we look at self-modifying code, I love it. I love to see self-modifying code in the opening hand. Helps you be aggressive. The prepaids, obviously. The clone chips, obviously. Maker's Eye, Sure Gamble, Lucky Find. Dirty Laundry is great opening hands. And Diesel, right? Those are your 3 ofs in this deck. So if you see any combination of those cards, think twice about mulliganing.
Yep, for sure. Most definitely.
So so use that the Bad Pub rule of 3.
The rule of 3.
So Hollis, talk us through now. I'll let you go for a bit. Piloting this deck. What's the key we're looking at here?
Sure. So I'll say this is, I won't pick a specific matchup. I'll pick what I generally end up doing. So assuming I have, a fairly average to good hand, right? So I have a self-modifying code out, I maybe have an economy card, and a prepaid voice pad or something like that, and maybe I even have some draw. To me, that's a really good hand to start with. So the thing that I like to do in the very beginning of the game is I like to start off with the self-modifying code and some economy, and I like to just challenge the corp and make a run. Let me tell you why. The reason why I want to challenge a run early is that at this stage of the game, especially if I have, the ample credits to do so, I don't have any breakers in play. So the threat that self-modifying code grants me as the runner is that I can basically choose what threats are worth paying to break. So let's say I make a run in my turn 1, click 3. So let's go crazy. Let's say click 1, Sure Gamble. Click 2. I know it's not efficient. I'm just going to use this example. Click 2. I install self-modifying code. I don't even want to save the credit from the install, Jameson. And I say I'm gonna make this run right now on HQ. There's nice on HQ. I'm making the run. I think it's important right now to go check my opponent's hand for agendas turn 1. My opponent has a really tough decision because usually, unless they had an amazing economic start and they're going to res something way big in the beginning, usually they're going to res this early game ice. They're going to res the Enigma. They're going to res the Wall of Static, the Eli, the Architect. They're going to res these kinds of ice. And what self-modifying code does is when my opponent rests that ice, I now have the option to go search for the breaker as I encounter it. So when my opponent rests the Wall of Static, I can go, hey, you know what? I don't need to look at the HQ right now. I just needed the corp to spend money. So you know what? I'm going to bounce. I ran and I bounced. When my opponent reses, an Architect, I can say, wow, I don't want to give my opponent free clicks. So yeah, I'm going to go search out my Mimic. I'm going to, get that installed right now with self-modifying code, and I'm going to break it. And what I've done there is it gives me a lot of flexibility as that runner. I get the option to determine, to me, what is worth breaking. But my opponent is really put in a really bad position. We said it before. The best thing you can do as a runner is to force the corp to make either bad decisions or just decisions they don't want to make. And that's what having a card like self-modifying code does. So early game, I start off with that kind of aggression. The reason why this is amazing to me and why, and this should kind of guide you with how you play the deck from that point going forward, you have clone chips and you have self-modifying code, and as time goes on, you may even draw your breakers. So something to consider is that when you're making these runs and you have this flexibility to go tutor out the breaker that you need, that is an advantage that you will have for a fair portion of the game. So use it. Make a run when you have a self-modifying, your opponent res a Wall of Static. Okay, well now you went and searched for your barrier breaker and you got a clone chip on the board. Well sure, lucky find, make a run on a different server now. Well now they can't say, oh well he doesn't have a sentry breaker, so I guess this ability is going to trigger. You can go in, grab that sentry breaker, and now you're safe again. The deck, as a result of that, and what I just described, can be very aggressive. You're putting pressure on the corp, and you basically are doing it at very little risk to yourself from having subroutines trigger. And that's the biggest benefit of a deck like this, is that you don't have to deal with subroutines triggering that you don't want to fire with good play. So a common way, I guess trying to add all that together, because I talk a lot, guys, and I'm sorry, is you basically are going to pilot the deck in an aggressive manner that effectively is safe for your board and your hand and your programs, but forces your opponent to constantly have to make bad decisions. If you can go search for the breaker you need to get through, make that run, especially if it's going to be multi-access. Make that run, grab the breaker you need, pay for all the ice, and look at the cards and continue scoring. When your credits dip low, cards like Lucky Find and Sure Gamble, with the aid of prepaid voice pad, allow you to burst up. All of a sudden, you're not gaining 4 credits. You're gaining 6 and 7. You're not gaining 6 credits with Lucky Find. You're gaining 6 to 9. So where before you may only be sitting at three credits, well, now you play Lucky Find, you're gaining 8 credits. The server you couldn't get into, well, you can surely get in now. Think of it like a small stim hack that doesn't make you take a brain. That's pretty much my advice for piloting, is be aggressive and make runs that are advantageous for you and have very little risk. Because the deck is well equipped to not really be risky when you run.
And I think that's a great learning point for new players. I've seen many people play a deck like this and not believe in the recursion that the deck has, not be comfortable enough with it, which means they won't be aggressive, right? They're sitting there with a parasite and they're saying, not going to use that right now because I might need it later on. Right? Like, do I want to, do I really want to do a discard dig and ditch my Atman out? Because what if I need my Atman later on? So people aren't living in the now enough with this deck, because if you don't do that and deal with the situations as you encounter them, which this deck is supposed to do, it's supposed to be, like we said, the toolbox for any question that is on the board. If you don't do that, there might not be a late game later on.
Yeah.
So it's better it's better to use the tools that you have at your advantage right now in the moment than save things.
Yep. Basically.
So you do really have to be aggressive with this deck to an extent, Yeah. Hollis, do you want to explain, looking through the events first, when would the ideal time to Escher be?
I put in Escher actually as a means to combat a few things that I found personally really annoying. Those examples would be, and I don't see them very often anymore, but they still may be there in some metas. You may notice that this is kind of annoying for you as well. There's a few ice that the deck does have trouble breaking, or in general just are very expensive. So I'll start with like code gates. So if you look at like Next Bronze, and that entire next suite. As Next, now granted you have Parasite, which is going to be your biggest friend against those matchups. Sometimes things happen. I find often that HB fast advanced decks especially, they may run things like Chronos Project, which of course will remove cards from your discard pile completely out of the game, from your heap completely out of the game. So if Parasite really isn't doing enough work for you, or just it's gone from the game, sometimes you end up in a scenario where you get these really powerful code gates that are really, really stacked. Or even better, in the defensive HB, you get a card like Turing, which is very, very strong on remotes, but is really just garbage on centrals. The advantage of Escher is that you can basically move the ice around to wherever you want it. So whereas a server now is really, really strong, you weaken it considerably by moving the ice. The same thing goes for a card like Crick, or any positional ice really, where they get stronger on a specific central server or remote server. The ability to move the ice around effectively weakens that ice and gives you windows where you can actually get in to that server where before you actually couldn't.
Right. And then a strategy that people are going to use to play against you is Lady is a very common barrier breaker in Shaper.
Yep.
People have replaced Lady where it used to be Corroder. Lady can be burned out.
Yep.
Shaper likes to attack R&D you can see with the amount of R&D we have built in there. So people will put barriers over their R&D if they're playing Shaper to tax out lady credits, which means make you spend them. Now, if you can Escher the barriers to a server that you're not going to run, you don't need to worry about burning your lady out anymore. Or, your last turn, when you don't have that lady, move stuff away. So it's going to give you options late game.
Yeah, I totally agree. The ability to, when an opponent begins super stacking R&D, or any server really, with a lot of barriers, if you've been putting on enough aggression and forcing multiple pieces of ice to be installed, the biggest advantage you're going to gain yourself is you can say, all right, well, you know what, I don't want to deal with 2 or 3 barriers on R&D at the same time. That's just, come on, like that's just overkill. So how about this? I'm going to use Escher. I'll break the subroutines do all through the ice on HQ, and now here we'll move a barrier to HQ, we'll move a barrier on archives, move a barrier in the remote, and now if there's a barrier on R&D, there's only like 1 now. There's not 2 of them. So I'm saving my lady counters. I mean, in general, that flexibility is incredibly powerful when you're looking at a toolbox deck like this where you have a lot of specific answers. It's super, super helpful.
When do you feel like you're going to use Scavenge? Do you feel like it's just to reoccur the lady?
Yes. So it's a card that I actually love having a 1 of because of its usefulness. I think that, with Lady being a limited use barrier breaker, or seemingly, I would say seemingly limited use barrier breaker in this kind of deck, the issue that you run into is that, let's say, you are, for whatever reason in the game, you're being taxed heavily with your barriers and your lady counters. The advantage is you can sort of play against the corp in this aspect. I have 1 counter on lady, so I make a run on HQ. All right, I've lost my counter. So now you feel safe on R&D. Well, not today. Scavenge, discard lady, put it back in play. It's got 4 brand new counters on it, and I can do the run I want to make again. It saves you a clone chip as well. So against fast advance matchups, you can save your clone chips just for using your clots, as opposed and getting clot in play, as opposed to constantly using scavenge for or clone chip to put lady back into play, which is just, it's because of that it makes it so interesting. There's other unique plays you can make as well in regards to specific ice. I've scavenged for admin before, just because the game state that was there, it made more sense to put admin into play as opposed to the lady that I had. I've actually scavenged, a common play I've done before is ladies in play with 0 counters, but at this point I see they have all their Elis in play. Well, that's a pretty simple decision. You scavenge lady, you put in admin, and you just pay 4, and admin's now at 4, and if that's the only barrier breaker they may carry, well, now I have a solution for Eli, and lady doesn't have to come back. I can just use the admin for the rest of the game.
Nice tip.
Yep.
Stimhack. Stimhack, are you using it for that Hail Mary run? Or
yeah. A whole bunch of things. I think the one thing that I think that people forget is that ideally, yes, Stimhack is going to be used like, I have to, there's no way I'm at 3 credits. I gave the corp a window because I wanted to, be super aggressive on R&D, and now the corp, they're looking and they're going, oh yeah, I think I can make it. I think I got it. So, when they make their Hail Mary, I have the ultimate defense, or offense really, and I go, well, too bad, so sad. Here's that Stimhack, and I'm in the server, and I've used it for a ton of things. I've used it for the winning agenda, of course. I've used it for one individual run to hope I get lucky. I've even used it to trash an asset or upgrade that I just did not want to pay my own credits for.
Right.
It's got a lot of usefulness there, and especially when you get to late game, when certain cards in your hand become less and less valuable based on the board state. Stimhack is a card you kind of don't care using and getting rid of something. You got a Spirit Astrolab in hand. Why not Stimhack, and hopefully it hits it.
Yeah, and also it's also be comboed with these recursion to pay for pulling some stuff out. The self-modifying code, you have to pay 2 extra plus the install cost. Right?
Yep.
The clone chip, you have to pay the install cost.
Yeah.
So Stimhack lets you use those 9 credits during the run, where self-modifying code and clone ship are reaction or trash effects used during the run, so they all synergize together.
Yep. I've seen even I mean, I have seen players, and granted, I can't necessarily say it's the most optimal, but I mean, just for the sake of being super aggressive in the early game and getting everything as soon as possible, I have seen players who got all their econ early start stacking up a little bit with econ, and then I've seen them make a run, but instead of just doing a regular run, I've seen them with the combination of like two, interestingly, like two self-modifying code and clone chip. I've seen a player be at something like roughly 10 to 12 credits, and they go, I run R&D stim hack. And they just go, all right, so with my 10 or 12 credits plus this stim hack money, here's Lady, here's Gordian, Mimic is out. I mean, there you go. My suite is out. Now I take a brain early, but now everything I do from this point going forward is all econ, make a run. Econ, make a run. And you would just be surprised. I mean, and they'll levy it back, or same old thing, and they'll use stim hack again. They're not afraid. I know there's a player actually, Ahmed Abessi. I think Ahmed Abessi I saw one time through, I think, a stim hack, a levy, and a same old thing. I think I made stim hack 3 times in this game, and he didn't care. He was like, whatever, it gets me the agenda. I'm doing what I have to do.
Yeah, and that's the way you got to play, right? Sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the events and the cards that are going to stand out there. Our hardware was pretty standard for piloting clone ships. When you get them, put them down. In Kate, they're free if you use them for your first ones. The R&D interface, obviously it's pressure. Astrolabe's going to get you the draws you need, and the voice pads fuel the deck. The resources, same old thing for recursion, symmetrical visage to help you with the draw and find the stuff you want. Film Critic is the sticky one. Film Critic is a card you kind of really want to see early, and I've noticed a couple people, when we talk card substitutions later on, trying to get 2 Film Critics in their deck just to be able to see it early.
Right.
So that's going to be a feel that you have to make for yourself, but you at least want one in there. Yeah. And then obviously it's going to do what Film Critic does, right?
Saves your game versus RP.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Yeah.
So if you're playing high-level tournaments and stuff like that, you're gonna want to go with a Film Critic.
For sure.
Atman has been an interesting card, buddy. And I think new players find a hard time to know what to do with this card. Do you want to step them through like a little bit of strategy on how to play Atman? Like, how do I know what to set Atman at? That's the hardest thing for a new player to figure out.
Yeah. I will say that in a lot of, so I would like to preface it. I would say that Atman is really strong, obviously, when you are more aware of the deck that the corp is piloting. Because when you have an understanding of the strength of their ice, you can kind of pick which cards are your biggest problems, or most commonly encountered ice. And Atman can be sort of the one-for-all icebreaker. Example, a common thing that I'm seeing in like some of these NEH deck archetypes is they're not running Eli anymore, as an example. They're running 3X Architect, and they're running Wall of Static. So if you were to look at that, you can kind of go, well, you know what's interesting? I could play Mimic, but if I just run Atman at 3 strength, that means that I can break Architect with Atman, I can break Wall of Static with Atman, and with a little bit of help from Data Sucker as an example, I can break any ice they may play that may be hovering around a 4 strength or maybe even a 5 strength. So Atman is sort of the ace in the hole for a specific, they tend to be ace in the hole for either a very broad common ice strength or a very specific piece of ice. I've seen extreme issues where someone has used Atman to break Suzanu no Mikoto.
Yeah.
And I mean, granted, that sucks when you have to.
And usually those are spag stories.
Yeah, right? But I mean, when you have to, right? And that's what Atman does. Atman allows you, with the help of even like Stim Hack, right? Atman allows you to target a piece of ice that you may not be able to break in your current suite and go, well, I'm sorry, this still is not going to prevent me from making the run that I need to make and getting in.
And just be careful that it's not an early game ice. Like, you don't
Yeah.
want to, get that on the board too early. It's one where you want to read the state a little bit. It's
Yeah.
not like back in the day where you drop down an Atman at 4 and you're good for the game. You really need to look now to see what you're playing against and let that fluctuate a little bit. Anything else there on tips for running with Atman?
Basically, I will say that I pitch it early. I usually pitch it pretty early. If I get it early, I pitch it. And part of that reason is because it depends on matchup. If I will admit there's a bit of a metagame, or I guess a metagame there mentally when you know your opponent's deck. When I play against my friends all the time, Admin is way more likely to come out and play when I know exactly what they're playing, right? But in a tournament setting, granted, archetypes are popular, but you don't know the complete ice layout that they have. So, the mileage with admin may vary, and you don't want to really play admin too early if you're not aware of exactly, or more aware of what they're playing. Because if you put it out the wrong strength, it's not a great card. If it's not going to be really useful for, a lot of the ice that they have, it's really not that great. So...
yeah.
Most of the time, it's not that.
In situations like that, rely on your recursion. Don't be afraid to pitch it.
Yeah.
You will be able to get it back when you need it.
Exactly. Yeah.
The other stuff we walked through, sharpshooter is good for those surprise stuff. How we use this card is you can pitch it early, and then when somebody tries to surprise you with something, you have the clone chip on the board to be able to pop it, bring it back, and then discard it again to use it.
Yep.
So sharpshooter is doing work
Yeah.
while it's in your discard, in your heap.
Mm-hmm.
Mimic, obviously standard, a card that has been around since core set, and Gordian Blade is our lovely code gate breaker.
Yes.
Self-modifying code is obviously, we've talked about how great it is to help set up. Data Sucker is always nice to have down because it's going to, it's kind of like that pseudo economy card. It's going to save you a little bit, bring the strength down when you so need to. But it's also going to help you with synergizing effects with Mimic and your Atman. Like you said before, dropping something at 3, getting those 4, maybe 5 strength pieces of ice you're encountering down just a tad there.
Yep.
The last thing to talk about in piloting, I know last week you talked about it dealing with this card. Why don't you talk about using Clot?
Yeah.
This will be another thing where the timing structure is going to trip up a new player.
Right. So, of course, a lot of people know that fast events decks are a thing, and so for the majority of fast events decks out there, I guess that the nature of a fast events deck is that you are scoring an agenda the same turn that you install it. So you're usually going install and advancing twice, or you're installing and advancing 3 times due to card effects, whether it's Biotic Labor or Sand City Grid. You're trying to score the agenda the same turn it's played out. Now, Clot, of course, says it's a virus, and it says the corp cannot score agendas the same turn they are installed. So it seems like you got them. That's it. You're taken care of. You beat it. But unfortunately, that's not the whole story. Corps have a card called Cyberdeck's Virus Suite, and Cyberdeck's Virus Suite has a trash ability that says you can, or a res ability, a res cost of 3, and it has a trash ability that says purge all virus counters. Clot unfortunately says trash Clot if the corp purges virus counters. So if they purge, you lose the effect on Clot. And unfortunately, when Clot leaves play, its effect does also. So,
Wah, wah.
So basically, the counterplays that you'll see often when you're running a card like Clot is you'll, I guess, stepping it through. The corp will res a Sand City Grid. They will then, and I'm going to ignore the Shimmer from Sand part of it, They'll res Sansan City Grid, and they'll install a card into that server. Now, at that moment, before they do any advancements or play any other card, you have a window after that first click, or whatever that click is to install, you now have a window for your paid abilities, because the corp has passed their priority for their window of paid abilities for the most part. So you now have a window for paid abilities. Let's say you want to use your clone chip or your self-modifying code, and you go to install Clot. So you go, haha, I got you, corporation. You've installed that agenda after resing that Sansan. Shame on you. Now you can't score. I think I've won. After you install Clot, they can now res their CyberDex virus suite and trash it to purge virus counters. And now that both, I guess, windows for paid abilities have been taken, there's now no longer a paid ability window for you to get Clot again. So you went to go get Clot after they installed the card. They purged virus counters in their paid ability window, and now there's no paid ability windows left for you to go back and grab that Clot again from your second clone chip, right? So now the corp can just score that agenda before you can do anything else, and that is the reason why number one, even with that being the case, even with CyberDex virus suite being a thing that can happen, you still slot the Clot. I want to make that very, very clear. Just because the corp can purge virus counters this way, it does not matter. You should still slot Clot, because if they don't have that card in play, well, surprise, you now have stopped an agenda from being scored. And beyond that, Gilbert Miller, I do see that. I do see what you're saying. The reason why I'm not going too in depth here, Gilbert, is that there's actually more to it. Because the timing window is based on whether they're using a card like Shimmer from Sansan, or they're advancing the card and then giving the runner the very last window to use their paid ability window, and then doing a final advance to put the second advancement on the score. God. If you would like to read more about the interaction, we can lay it all out in the timing structure and explain it. I want to make sure I got this. Still cost some credits to res. Not sure. Sure. Even if I explain the full timing structure for whether Shipment from Sansan is in the hand and being the card that advances, or they're individually using a click and a credit to advance a card, the corp's behavior is the same because it's dictated by the cards or way they're going to score it. If the corp has to install advance, then they're just going to advance it once, advance it twice, and then go CVS, get rid of your Clot, I score. Or they're going to go, install the agenda, your reaction, do you install Clot? When you say yes, they're going to go Shimmer from Sansan, CVS. Like, basically the actions are effectively the same.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying that you want to be able to pull Clot out as soon as they install the card, or do you wait for one install?
No, you wait.
One advancement.
If you wait, the problem is that if you actually wait for an advancement and they instead have Shimmer from Sansan, once they use Shimmer from Sansan, you don't have a window anymore, because if Sansan City Grid is already rezzed, there's no paid ability window between the card being advanced and you scoring it like that. So if you have the two advancements and you meet the condition from Shimmer from Sansan, or you meet the conditions from Sansan City Grid, scoring done. Like you lose it. Like they're going to score.
Like just say it, right? The table's blank and it's install.
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
Like when they install one card.
Yes.
You want to use Clot right then, or do you wait for the first advancement to go on it?
You want to use Clot right then. If it's MBN, you probably want to use Clot right then. And the reason why you want to do that is because if they have Shimmer from Sansan, you're not going to be able to tax them through getting Clot again. You basically lose your window. If they have Shimmer from Sansan, the window you have to go get Clot then, if you wait, is gone. So the moment they install the card, that's when you want to actually go grab the Clot. If there's someone else that has a better understanding of, if I'm wrong about that, please let me know. But my understanding is, based on the timing structure, the moment Shimmer from Sansan is played, you're done. I mean, at that point, they've met every condition available to score. The card has 2 advancements. Shimmer from Sansan allows them to score at only 2 advancements, so you're done. So that means that, unfortunately, when you play Clot, you want to do it after they first install the card and pretty much make it clear they're trying to fast advance that card. Now, keep in mind...
And that's when they're installing it on a Sansan City Grid, right? You're saying?
Right. That's when they install on the Sansan City Grid. Or if they're playing like Biotic Labor and they go install, right? Install and advance once. At that point, yeah, you want to go ahead and say, all right, hold on, I'll go grab Clot right now.
Yeah. Because I was talking about like a naked server, right? Like they put one card down, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they put one card down, nothing is in it, no upgrades, right? Then they're going to advance it once. Then you can still, after that one advancement, then you could bring the Clot out so they can't, put the second advancement Astro Script, right? Like.
Right, exactly. That's also a really good way to look at it. My biggest concern, my overall biggest concern is just in period when you start looking at Shimmer from Sansan, it really fiddles with like the way you have to play Clot. Yeah, because it gives them 2 advancements immediately. So any of their paid abilities that come out like hosted agenda counters. Like, it's like, well, I just move it over. We're done. We're done here. CVS.
Yeah, Clot's a little hard to understand, but like, hopefully that kind of stuff, cleared it up a bit. You really want to be reactive. If there's something in the server already face down and they put a card in there, it's best as a new player to just get Clot out at that time. If they put a card down in an empty server, advance it once, then you want to react and put Clot out. So. Clot, do your homework, research that timing structure just a little more, or ask the player you're playing against at your casual league night to help you step through things. Like we said, Netrunner's a community where people are going to help you unless you're at a top 16 cut at a premier event or something, right? Then you should have already known what's going on. The last one I want to talk about quickly, Hollis, is how aggressively do you think you should use Parasite in this deck?
Depending on the archetype, Parasite usually goes down as fast as possible. I think for me, it's pretty common. If I use it as an interesting way to sort of divert attention onto ice that I find annoying. Like obviously I have a huge dislike for Next Ice because gosh, I think Next Ice is the one reason why I love Parasite so much. But I have thrown it before.
You do want to get those quick kills with it, right? Like
you do.
Don't be afraid to use it on pop-ups. Don't be afraid to use it on one strength ice. Little annoying ice that you want gone.
Yeah.
Because pop-ups people put it on centrals for a reason because they know they're going to get return out of it. Kill that. Yeah. Kill it. Don't be afraid because you have clone chip in there. And like I said before, if you don't take advantage of the situation now, there might not be a late game.
Right.
Right. So you don't want to look back at the game and say, man, if I only had put that Parasite down, turn 3, it would be a whole different game.
Yeah, that is true. The common thing I think I see happening with Parasite is I often like to throw it immediately down on like a toll booth. Toll booth is already taxing enough, and I feel like if I throw it on a toll booth, they could purge every turn, but I'm slowing purge every couple turns or what have you. But I'm slowing the corp down. I'm saving myself credits every time I encounter that toll booth. And with the help of Parasite, eventually I'll kill it if I can.
Yeah.
And it just kind of eliminates a very one of the best control ice in the game as early as I can, especially if I'm being aggressive on a particular server. If a toll booth is an R&D, and I have a Parasite out and I can grab that data sucker, I am not at all afraid just to hit HQ multiple times to either force a purge when the corp isn't ready, or even better, to force them to trash the toll booth because they can't afford a purge. They need to work on developing everything else.
The last 2 things that we can talk about the easy one first. Data and Destiny's around the corner.
Yeah.
I don't think that Data and Destiny adds a lot to this build right now. I haven't deep dived anything, but this deck for a beginner player is great to pick up because in this form right here, you have a tried, tested, and true tournament winning, deck archetype.
Yeah.
And this is going to get you through. Could still potentially, we're 80% sure that this build is probably top tier for Worlds.
Pretty sure Cade is the top tier runner deck. Pretty sure.
Right?
Pretty confident.
I mean, most people have held off playing Data and Destiny or against Data and Destiny in big tournaments. So that's why we can't say, for sure, because there might be something hidden in the cards in there that gets flushed out between now and Worlds. But you are not at a loss if you take this to a tournament, if you take this to game night, if you start to study this build.
Yeah.
We've been over the Data and Destiny cards. Everything's been spoiled. And there's just nothing that sticks out to be slotted in there that will drastically change this build. Now, that's not to say that something or one card slot can't come in and replace something, or somebody finds something with those new faction independent runners that gets moved in here and replace some of the influence, but this deck is still going to be competitive on a world scene this year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and you're going to see a lot of the builds are, if not exactly like this, they're going to be very similar. Now
that goes into our next point and our closing point here. So if you guys have questions on this, now's your time to throw them out quickly while we wrap this topic up. Possible card substitutions. Escher is not in every one, so that one's can get slotted out. I've seen for substitutions for this deck, I've seen people play an indexing.
Right.
Still as a choice. It's indexing still a catch you off guard kind of card. It's not as popular as it used to be.
Right.
But it still does damage. So don't be afraid to use an indexing in this style if you're comfortable with it. Double Film Critic, as we hinted at, is not a horrible choice. It's still good, still very competitive. The other thing too is that we've seen professional contacts in earlier versions of this deck and in still newer versions. Now, probably 70% of the people have swapped out professional contacts for symmetrical Visage, but if you still like Proco, it's, there's still an argument out there to have that card included.
Yeah.
The other things that you can do, guys, is play around with the different numbers here. Maker's Eye at 3 is always good. But if you want to, try one more R&D interface, or take out your Escher and add another R&D interface, that's going to still do work for you. Yeah,
I've even seen like a change that I even messed with just because I like the card so much. I've taken out the Escher just to put in the symmetrical Visage, just because I wanted to see it earlier, and I like having the card when it. I never am unhappy to see that card. Whereas Escher, I don't always find I can play it every game, but symmetrical Visage, I can. I can play that every single game and be fine. I mean that may that gives a little bump to your economy. I don't know. I mean, all those changes you mentioned, Jameson, are really good. I may even take out my my Escher, throw in the second RDI, and just see what happens.
Yeah, and that's going to be personal preference, right? Like, and just how you feel and how confident you are. Again, Shaper is a build that heavily attacks R&D, so that's where you want your primary focus to be. Obviously, when you're piloting this deck, don't ignore the remote, because that is how the corp scores. So be very minded about how they're playing, what's in hand. Don't just think, well, Shaper's an R&D attack faction, that's the only place I'm going to run. That will win you games, but the high level players will be able to play around that and have proven to it. So if you haven't seen them play an agenda in a while, then that's the time to legwork the hand, and that's why that's in there.
Yep.
So let's see. Would you consider two same old things?
Yeah.
One reserved for Levy, the other for another event. That's also you know.
Yeah, I think that's good.
A brilliant move as well.
Yeah.
You know, like we said, with the amount of events we have in there, every event is in there for a reason, and it lets you. You know, I would love to have multiple, 4 or 5 copies of some of these events, and that's what Same Old Thing brings to the table.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
So yeah, great move in upping the Same Old Thing, and playing with that number ratio there. I think that pretty much wraps up this deck guide here for Kate. Hollis, did you have anything else to add for this week?
No, man. I mean, this is a deck that's been around for a while, so I know a lot of people are very used to it. A lot of people have seen it. But, like I said, if you're an intermediate player or, a newer player and you're just getting into these, this particular archetype, it's probably not bad to have an explanation of this and give you a list, tinker around with it, play it, and just see how effective it is, how good it is.
Yeah, I don't know what the breakdown is for what everything is from each pack. It's pretty eclectic across the cycles and stuff. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some packs that are not represented in here. If you're a new player and only have a core set and you're looking to, just pick and choose what you need to build a deck like this.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have that off the top of our head, but Kate is a core set identity. She's not going anywhere, and like you said, this ID has been around long enough that people are always going to be playing this. It's very, very powerful.
Yep.
And as we move forward into the next cycle and see what new tools and tinkering toys the shapers get, I'm sure the shell of Kate will stay with some minor adjustments.
Yeah.
So, you're in good hands, people, if you gravitate towards a build like this.
If they give Kate a good century breaker, oh man. I don't even know what we're gonna do with that extra.
I don't think we'll ever see that. I don't think we'll ever see a good century in Shaper.
What's gonna happen?
All right, man. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Great turnout here in the chat. Thanks for all the positive comments and joining us. Thanks to those people who listen later, and appreciate everything you guys do to support us. Take care.
Thank you guys.
And we'll catch you next week.
Have a good night, guys.